Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Tuesday, June 6th, also known as D-Day, also known as my birthday. So thank you for coming. May I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Lamont,
Here.
Councilmember Rosenthal, Mayor Pro Tem Mullen,
Here.
Mayor Peak,
Here.
Commissioner Mazza,
Here.
Commissioner Euring,
Here.
Chair Pearson.
Here.
We have a quorum with Councilmember Wagner absent, Commissioner Jennings absent, and Vice Chair Marks absent.
Thank you. Theo and Uma, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance by coming up to the microphone?
We start?
Yep, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Theo and Uma. May I please have an approval of the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. A report on the posting of the agenda.
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on June 2nd, 2017.
At this time, did we have any public comment slips, or did anyone fill out a public comment slip, or did anybody want to make a public comment at this time before we get started? All righty. So we're going to start off with our proposed dark sky agenda. Thank you, Jessica.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. As many of you are probably already aware, the city has been working with a couple of different people here, some specialists, to help devise a dark sky ordinance. With us tonight is James Benya, Principal Illuminating Engineer and Lighting Designer for Benya Burnett Consultancy, and Pete Strasser, Technical Director for the International Dark Skies Association. Jim and Pete are here tonight to lead us in our tour. However, before we do that, they're going to be discussing the benefits and goals of implementing a dark sky ordinance and what we should be observing tonight on the tour.
Okay, ready? Go. That was there. There we go. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here. There's a little funny story happened on my way to the presentation tonight. We really hadn't thought much about doing a presentation tonight. We were sort of planning on a tour, which we're obviously going to go on. But it was suggested maybe we ought to do one first. Not having had one completely prepared and ready to go, I went back into the archives and I dug out the presentation I gave to you in 2012. And Pete and I sat down and we modernized it. And so what you're seeing tonight ought to look a little familiar because many of you were here back then. But it's been modernized to really speak of where we're at today. You know, in lighting, things have changed tremendously in those 5 years. We now, and we're going to see a lot of this tonight, but we're now in the era of LED lighting for all of our outdoor lighting. It makes all the sense in the world. It's more energy efficient, it's long life, the bulbs don't burn out, all kinds of wonderful things happen. But as with any improvement or any advancing technology, there can be some side effects. And so the dark sky ordinance that we started talking to you about 5 years ago is even more important today to prevent the problems, some of the bad side effects of LED lighting. And we'll show you those a little bit later as well. With me is Pete Strasser from the International Dark Sky Association. We team up to work on this for you. And Pete, why don't you come up, because I think you probably have a comment or two you're going to want to add to what we have to say here tonight. To begin with, you know, this slide sort of tells a pretty big story. It shows the difference between a blackout condition where all the lights in a community are turned off and what happens when all the lights in a community are turned on. artificial sky glow, glare, and everything else become a problem. Instead, wouldn't it be nice if we could look up and see the Milky Way like you see in the slide on the left? So, International Dark Sky Association, I served on the board of directors. I served as the technical committee chair. Pete is the technical director of IDA, and we're ever more working on trying to prevent this. These slides have been put together by some world-famous researchers from Europe primarily, and they show the growth in light pollution. Those little dots, the whiter the dot is, the brighter the light pollution is seen from space. But as they get green and as they get other colors, these are meant to represent different steps in a system that calibrates how bad light pollution is. The worst light pollution steps are the ones that are going to show the brightest white, and the reds are next worst, and the greens and the blues are getting less worse and less worse until you finally get down to black, where you actually can probably see the Milky Way. Well, this was 1950. This is the middle 1970s. Look at the growth around the major cities, in this case primarily in the eastern United States and Canada. Here was 1997. The growth is continuing to emerge. One of the ones that I was kind of personally intrigued by is if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, not quite in the corner, but those two dots that are pretty much at the top of the slide near the left, that's Alberta, Canada. Only 2.5 million people live there, but what they have is a lot of petroleum processing plants, which are very careless about light pollution. And they're almost as bad as the city of Toronto of 7 or 8 million. So, it's not just population that drives this. It's actually things that we do as humans. This is what it's expected to be by 2025. And you can see that we're losing that night sky and we're losing the ability to see what's really up there. One could say that maybe it's important, maybe it's not important. One could say that maybe if you go to the Grand Canyon where you can still see the Milky Way, it's awe-inspiring. But wouldn't it be good if we could see a lot of the stars anywhere we are, not just having to go to unique places? So the mission of IDA is to preserve and protect all of that. But it's not just about seeing the stars, and it's not just about astronomy. 1 year ago, the American Medical Association came out and said that light pollution is a threat to human health and the environment. And they took a stand that said we should not use lighting with a color temperature that's any higher than 3,000 Kelvin. And we will show you tonight what 3,000 Kelvin looks like, and we'll show you what things that are higher than 3,000 look like. And I think you'll probably end up agreeing. That's a pretty good idea just from an aesthetic and common sense point of view. AMA has now said, no, it's even more important than that. It's very controversial because who's the AMA to tell the lighting industry about lighting? Well, my attitude is, who is anybody else to tell the AMA about health? So, and it was the AMA's Committee on Public Health that said this, and it's going to be part of the ordinance here if we're really smart. So you can see the sky glow from any major city, and Los Angeles is kind of a poster child for artificial sky glow. But if we do things better, if we take some of the steps we're talking about, just remember that in the entire Los Angeles metropolitan area, the darkest place is Malibu, and areas that are nearby that are natural areas. But all you got to do is get over the hills, and this is what you see. IDA is actively engaged in continuing to find ways to mitigate light pollution. That doesn't mean we, speaking now for IDA, want to turn off all the lights. What it really means, what we want to do is just control them, so when we need them, we have them. And when we don't need them, we're not wasting the energy and we're not causing the light pollution. There's a number of things we can do that. For instance, look at the slide on the bottom. That slide is the Twin Towers of Light in New York, memorial to 2001. And they've shown these spotlights in clusters straight up in the air representing the two towers. What happened was birds and insects and others got disoriented by the light and flew in circles until they came crashing down to their death on the ground from being exhausted from swimming around in that light. So in memorializing the Twin Towers, we killed a lot of birds. We do, that these things are part of what we're learning are the impacts. In Northern California, we discovered that lights on bridges were affecting salmon runs. They literally stopped the salmon run in the Sacramento River in Redding by turning on the lights on the Sundial Bridge. So this is something we just got to learn to be more careful about. So the premise of light pollution is it impacts the comfort of neighbors. Even the simplest light pollution can be very offensive. Limits our enjoyment of the night sky. Negatively affects the biological cycles of all living beings, not just people, but bugs and birds and bunnies and pretty much everything on the planet. And of course, it wastes energy. So the basic concepts, number one, limit the total amount of light in the environment. Just keep it to as low as you need. Prevent direct upward light. So lighting fixtures that shine down, fine. Lighting fixtures that shine outward and upward, no good. Restrict light trespass onto adjacent properties. Reduce glare and control the color temperature, which is that American Medical Association recommendation. One way to do this, to be fair to our communities, to our businesses, to neighbors and everybody else, is to use a lighting zone system. Lighting zones were originally devised in California and Arizona to address the observatories, to provide a buffer zone of many, many miles around the major observatories in our two states. But it's evolved. Currently, California's Title 24 in the Code of Regulations requires and actually divides the state up into lighting zones. But it gives each community the ability to set its own lighting zones within that community. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today and tomorrow. Lighting zone 0 is where you shouldn't have any lighting at all. Okay, it adversely affects the environment. Lighting zone 0 is going to be part of what I think we're going to recommend certainly when we talk in detail about the recommended ordinance. Lighting zone 1 is low ambient lighting. What this means is if you think of natural areas, rural areas, is what it was really intended to address. It's places where it's naturally pretty dark. That describes Malibu right now. Lighting zone 2 is areas of moderate ambient lighting, where there's night pretty much most of the time, commercial districts and things like that. There may be places in Malibu we may want to talk about lighting zone 2. That'll be part of the agenda tomorrow. But lighting zone 2 is one of those, is going to be a very important part of what we talk about afterwards. By the way, the topic as part of this is something called curfew. Curfew means that there's a point every night we should be turning lights off or dimming them at least. That is part of Title 24, Part 6, and we need to start doing more of it. Lighting zone 3 is moderately high ambient lighting. There's no lighting zone 3 in Malibu. And lighting zone 4 is high ambient lighting. The single biggest source of light pollution in California on the West Coast is the shipping areas, the ports of Long Beach and LA. You can see them from another planet. They're so bright. That's lighting zone 4. We don't have lighting zone 4. So the current proposal will be lighting zone 0 applies to public open space and ESHA areas, lighting zone 1 for most or all of Malibu, and lighting zone 2 reserved for critical infrastructure. That would mean if you've got a police station or something, some area where it's very important, well, maybe through the zoning process that you use, you might say, okay, that's going to be lighting zone 2. We don't see any lighting zone 3 or 4 at all. And we've been working closely with Jessica and Bonnie and their crew, and I think we're all pretty much on the same page on this and how to apply it. California Code of Regulations, as I said, Title 24, Part 1, requires communities to adopt lighting zones. and implement them as part of the building code. Title 24 Part 6, which is the energy code, restricts the amount of lighting you can use by lighting zone. This is a way we keep everything from getting too bright. An appropriate amount of wattage is allowed to light anything we need to. And we will see lighting zone 1 properties that are just fine. They're lighted just perfectly well tonight. So we're going to be okay. Title 24 Part 11 is Cal Green, our state sustainability code. And it requires lighting to be fully shielded and consistent, again, with the lighting zone. There's something called the BUG rating system. BUG stands for backlight, uplight, glare. And the BUG system, I'll talk about in a second, does limit lighting to make it appropriate for the lighting zones. It's a very simple system. It's standardized throughout the lighting industry now, and it's standardized by state code. So through most non-residential properties, the building code process and its enforcement will take care of things that used to be a problem. All we've got to do is make sure the color temperature is consistent with the AMA, and that'll take care of most non-residential properties.
Before you continue, Jim, I just wanted to make one clarification. The draft ordinance that we've been working on through ZORACES, through several meetings with ZORACES, and that we've attached to your packet, has taken the elements of the lighting zones that Jim has mentioned, but simplified it so that we have an equivalent thing that works with the zones that we have for our land use. And so that's how we're implementing the lighting zone concept. The building code still does, as Jim mentioned, contain the Title 24 elements, but if you're noticing that our draft ordinance doesn't have anything that says LZ1 or LZ0, that's why. We've kind of taken the elements of the model lighting ordinance and incorporated them in a different way that we feel like suits Malibu. So that's just a clarification of the lingo.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, that was, we've been back and forth several times with the document, but Bonnie's team has done an excellent job of trying to take the lighting ordinance and make it more, to use a phrase, user-friendly. Lighting codes and standards can get to be pretty technical, and I think they've done an excellent job of trying to make it understandable to pretty much everybody in the community. Just real quick, the backlight, uplight, glare, what it says is that in lighting zones 0 and 1, or as they will be implemented here, you're not allowed any uplight. You can't emit any light that goes directly upward. All light that goes down bounces up, a little bit of it, but you can't just throw it straight upward. That's a big no-no. But otherwise, there's all those different angular pieces around a light are designed to address some of the problems we have with other things such as glare. For example, the light coming out of a fixture but going almost horizontal, guaranteed to hit you in the eyeball, guaranteed to go inside your bedroom window, guaranteed to be a problem. The BUG system limits that. So by using Title 24, Part 11, this is contained, and everything will flow so that the ordinance, working together with the state codes, will prevent glare to a large extent, which is important progress. The assessment, and I'm not going to try and go through all these details, this is just showing how there are graphic representations of lighting, where light goes. So this is a picture, for example, just a slice through a light fixture. It's showing most of the light is going forward or in the red direction. Very little is going backwards. Backlight is the light that will come off a light in a parking lot or something, and it'll trespass into the adjacent neighbor's property. So backlight is limited by code as well. These graphics, those of us who work in lighting on a regular basis use these to readily assess what light is, how the light is coming out of a fixture. But again, this is for principally non-residential properties. This one's interesting. This is comparing two light fixtures of the same kind, but the one on the right has got what's called a house side shield. House side shields and front side shields, especially for cul-de-sacs, are frequently attached to these types of lights. And you can see the one on the right has virtually no blue light, which would be backlight onto an adjacent property. And this science has all evolved since the last time I was up here in front of you. And it's now common practice in not only all typical outdoor lighting, but street lighting as well. See the front lighting is pretty much the same, but it's the back lighting has changed, a bunch. Just because we have the system doesn't mean that we can't use decorative lighting, but it's got to be decorative lighting that doesn't throw light upward. The one on the top is a decorative light, but it shoots all its light downward like it's supposed to. The one on the bottom is a type of light that's a pretty good light. It doesn't have much uplight, but it would be too bright and too much uplight for here, because U3 means you could only use it in lighting zones 3 and 4. So, but you couldn't use it in lighting zone 0, 1, or 2. General requirements, of course, in any standard, we're going to have all these things. These are the things we're working on with Bonnie's team right now, is to make sure all this stuff is properly dealt with, and we haven't forgotten anything. And so, we're in the process of getting down to the last couple of reviews to make sure everything is dealt with properly. For example, you don't want to prohibit emergency lighting. That's sort of required by code by something else. So we want to make sure everything fits. There are a number of things in any code that we think, from our experience, and we work on lighting ordinances, throughout the nation now. The applicability, when are these properly applied? And again, we have the benefit of working with Bonnie and her crew to get these things right in the context of Malibu's needs. So not a lot to worry about here, but these are always considered. Here's the color temperature thing. We do strongly recommend 3000 K max. You'll see why a little bit later. We're actually recommending 2700 K, which is kind of the color of the lights that I'm standing under right now. They're a warmish toned light. They're a white light, you can see all colors, but they're more of a warmish tone. And the reason why is because the bluish colored lights, which are a higher color temperature, actually create more glare. They don't necessarily allow you to see better, but they create more of a glare reflex. So why have them? They don't look good, so let's just prohibit them. We are also suggesting you consider maybe requiring amber lighting on the beach, and of course near any ESHA or preservation areas. Residential lighting, this is one where Bonnie's team really took it on, developed very sensible set of rules and regulations that could be applied for every residential project. Residential projects are very important for this community, obviously, because this community has a lot of residences, and it's got a lot of very nice residences and people who live fairly close together. So what they've developed for a big chunk of their effort was to make this very understandable and usable in the community. There are limits to flood lighting and landscape lighting, which are two of the most common problems. So this is an example. Some bare exposed lights are going to be allowed, but very few. And that's probably going to be one of the things we'll be talking about tonight, tomorrow night, is should you allow one bare bulb decorative light by the front door of a house, for example? It's something to be decided. There's certain things you just don't allow. Aerial lasers, searchlights, and other things you have to have whenever you develop an ordinance, of course, would be special activity, high light level use areas, complex and non-conforming uses, things like that. It's always difficult to do these because every one of them is kind of unique, but an ordinance should have a process at least for resolving some of those issues. Special permits would be required for special things and unique things. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about this. I think we're going to go through another review tomorrow, getting ready for tomorrow night.
Yeah, most of these things are not actually just because of our community. We obviously don't have theme and amusement parks and correctional facilities, so these are some of the things, not yet. So a lot of these things are not applicable to us.
Yeah, fortunately. You're lucky. Oops. And one other thing is existing lighting. Probably one of the things we were talking about earlier this evening is amortization. How long does everybody have in the community to modernize their lighting? This is a critically important time in the evolution of lighting in communities. LED lighting has gone from being expensive, unusual, evolutionary, where are we? Today it is going in everywhere. And the problem that that creates is, in order to save energy, which is a primary reason for putting in LED lighting for most people, and eliminate maintenance for many, many owners, the problem is that there are many people willing to sell you LED lighting. And they're willing to install it and give you a really good deal and get you a rebate from Southern California Edison. Oh, they're willing to do all that stuff. But many of them aren't very careful about the color thing. And we will see some incidents tonight, some situations where it's already happened. It's going to happen to every parking lot light, every building mounted light in the entire community, and it will happen within the next 2 or 3 years. Catch it now, and you'll end up with a pleasant environment. Don't catch it now, and you're going to end up with a mess. And the amortization is a big part of that. Likewise, you have to have provisions. What do you do for new uses and structures and abandonment, change of use, and all that stuff? We'll leave that up to the people who really know what to do with that kind of language. So the status is it's ready for review and beginning the adoption process. We fully support the effort of your staff, and we will help them make any adjustments that are needed to get it fully ready as the process goes on. So we're going to review it, like I said, one more time thoroughly tomorrow and be fully prepared for our presentation tomorrow evening here. Just a few other comments. What we will see tonight, and you'll see all you got to do is drive around anywhere in the nation, is fixtures like the one at the top. We also call them luminaires. Like the one at the top, flat lenses, the light goes straight down. Absolutely, as long as they're not too powerful for the zone, that's what we're going to see most of the time we really want. Those with sagging lenses and lights that you can see from a distance, no good. And it's going to be pretty much that simple. These are all luminaires, light fixtures, of new types that have evolved pretty much since the LEDs came into being. And these are all different types that are designed to just shine the light downward and outward. You can put these lights on a wall, unlike the original wall pack type light, which is a very standard commercial light that throws a lot of light very far forward. These don't throw light upward, which the standard wall pack does. That's the evolution. And pretty much every lighting company today, whether it's an American lighting company or one of the many Asian companies that are bringing products in and being sold under various names in our country, it really doesn't matter. They're all kind of getting the message. You can see different types of street lights. You can see different types of parking lot lights. This whole evolution is now in full swing. As a matter of fact, many of the lights we would have bought 5 years ago when I first did this presentation, or a variation of it, can't even buy them anymore. There's light bulbs you can't buy anymore. Low pressure sodium, the pure yellow light bulb that was so important because of observatories, not going to make any more light bulbs. Starting January 2018, can't buy a new light bulb anymore. So all those existing lighting systems, which were so important to observatories, and we're working now in Flagstaff, Arizona, for example, all their street lighting is low pressure sodium. What are they going to do when you can't buy new light bulbs? And they do burn out, by the way, about every 2 years. So they're going to have to do something pretty darn quick, and that's what we're trying to help them do, is convert them to LEDs as well. The conversion issue, Title 24's impact, this study, which was done, I think it was done probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, shows the full cutoff lighting, the ones that just throw all the light downward. Only about a third of the existing outdoor lighting in the state, this is probably still pretty much true, only about a third of it is compliant with throwing the light just downward. About another 20% is most of the light goes downward. But almost half of the light in the existing stable of lighting that we have out there is throwing the light everywhere and causing more light pollution than it should. So as part of the Malibu Lighting Ordinance program, we will be doing our share to eliminate that 50%. And this is where amortization comes in. Amortization speeds up that conversion process. The good news, and this is the really good news, is at this point today, people can buy new lighting equipment and have it installed with the energy savings and the reduction in maintenance for commercial lighting alone. They can amortize their investment probably within about 5 to 7 years, especially with an incentive they can get from Southern California Edison or other utilities if there's another utility involved. That's a big deal. That's not going to last forever. Already SCE and the other utilities in California are saying, well, we're not going to give any more incentives for LEDs starting in a year or two because they're already pretty much standard. So this is the time to act is now. And again, the benefits will be obtained by commercial users. Residential users, you could say they're not going to save enough energy to pay for the light fixture, but it will reduce the number of complaints and number of issues amongst neighbors. So in short, what we're going to be showing you tomorrow night in more detail, and what we're going to be talking about tonight, is all meant to bring forward what we talked to you about 5 years ago. And I'm really pleased to see all of you here tonight. Thank you for coming. And we're going to be with you this evening. We'll answer any questions you've got. Pete, you want to add anything?
Good job. You'll do well in your review. Just a couple things. Something that's happening with the LED technology is the ability to utilize light in a manner we haven't before, and that's primarily through dimming. The older technology simply did not permit dimming the light down to a low level and ramping it back up rapidly. It just could not be done. Those sort of things can happen now with LEDs, and they should always be thought of as something that can now happen with installations, especially where safety and security are there. You can have a steady state, low level light that can ramp up quickly with motion sensing and things of that nature to make sure that you get a suitable level. And these are situations that we're not accustomed to. This is a very new way of lighting. The ability to have it low and ramp up is not something we're familiar with. So with the new technology, you have to be willing to also understand that there are new ways to light that the older technology simply didn't permit. So it's a very important thing to consider. Other than that, yeah.
Well, instant starting too. No
Yeah,
warm up.
Right.
Yeah.
They pop right on. And that's a critical difference that the older technology just simply didn't permit. Just a fundamental thing. Our name says dark sky. It doesn't say dark ground. Okay, you can have both. There's no reason why you can't have adequate illumination for the tasks that are set before you. You don't have to blast it up into the sky because that's what we have done in the past. We now have options that are available to us. There's simply no reason to contribute to light pollution. It's successful. It can be done.
All right, Jim and Pete, thank you very much. I know that Mr. Mazza has a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, Malibu's stepping up to the plate and doing this, and you said there's a state law about Title 24. Most of our light pollution, I assume, is Coast Highway street lights. Is Caltrans or the state involved in any of this, and will that change?
Sort of. You know, you've got Caltrans, but you've also got Edison. Edison has been reticent, and I was at a meeting yesterday of the California Street Lighting Association, and I contributed to a presentation there. Most of the street lighting in Southern California is owned by Southern California Edison, or SDG&E, especially Southern California Edison. So the Streetlight Association is helping communities buy their streetlights from Edison, and the minute they own them, convert them to LEDs. And if you do it very quickly and you do it very cleverly, which is what we're helping them do, communities can amortize their investment in the streetlights and actually make money after about 10 to 12 years. So that whole process is a very active process going on, because Edison doesn't want to change the lights. They put those lights in, 40 years ago, and they're still making money for Edison, hand over fist, and they don't want to invest in LEDs for that very reason. So I don't want to get into the politics of the CPUC and other stuff. The reality is that you could deal with that, except for Caltrans. Caltrans has their own set of standards, but Caltrans has already committed to making all of their systems, or at least their standards, are already LED. The question is that whose lights are they and who's responsible for making the conversion is one of the things you'll have to address. That's as much as I know, but I know we've been pushing Caltrans too, and I've been advising them, on a number of occasions, trying to inspire them to move to the 3000K exclusively, and they're getting the message. These things take a while because, as we all know, Caltrans is a bit of a bureaucracy, but they're beginning to listen, as are pretty much everybody in the state. Like I said, it's hard to tell the American Medical Association. They don't know anything about human health or the environment. And so we really should be listening, and it's hard to argue with.
All right, thank you. So I know that no one gave any public comment slips, and what I'm going to ask is if there's anyone that had a pressing question. Did anyone in the audience have a super pressing question that can't wait till tomorrow evening? Go. You want to come up to the mic real quick? Sure. And then if you can just state your name for the record.
Yes, I'm Zach Taylor, and just for folks that maybe are not so accustomed to all of the terminology that you just so expertly went through, we're all familiar with today. So today, if you went out, say at noon, and you had a Kelvin meter, because we had the heavy layer, heavy overcast, you'd be looking at about 3,000 degrees Kelvin, maybe 3,500.
At noon, I measured it today because I do have a Kelvin meter.
And what did it measure?
About 7,800.
Today?
Yeah.
7,800?
Yeah.
All right.
But, and did you measure that in Malibu, or was that over the hill?
Well, it was right here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just pointed it straight up at the
Awesome.
clouds. And,
I find that amazing.
well, I'll show it
Anyway,
to you later.
all right, that's fine. Anyway, my question is, when you replace the streetlights on PCH, when there's a conversion, what is the Kelvin temperature of the LED that is going into those lights?
We can choose.
What do you choose?
Jim, just come up to the mic.
Sure.
You can explain that a little bit, because I think
Zach's got a great question here, and since I've been, our firm is currently responsible for about 500,000 streetlight conversions throughout Southern California, the city of Chicago, throughout Arizona, and other places. We're now giving advice to Washington, D.C., Houston, Texas, and a few other places. The choice of the color temperature of the light is a choice. You can choose 4,000 Kelvin, 5,000 Kelvin, 3,000 Kelvin, and to a certain extent, all of them allow you to see. But what the AMA is saying is, yeah, all of them allow you to see, but as the Kelvin temperature goes up, the spectrum changes from melatonin. The melatonin levels in your bloodstream drop. Melatonin is present, they say it's what causes you to sleep, but it is also the number one, what's called body chemical that fights diseases, and it fights the serious diseases, cancer, diabetes, things like that. So they have found that with suppressed melatonin levels, you're disrupting your sleep, and you're weakening your body's defenses. It's not a good idea. And you can read about that. You know, there must be a million websites today where there's something about melatonin, the circadian system, and all that. So that's why the AMA has come out and said 3,000 Kelvin, that's it. Anything below is fine, but anything above, now you're simulating daylight. And that's a bad thing for plants, for bugs, every living being, not just people.
So, Jim, I know tonight that we're gonna see some of those lights and whatnot. And I'm sure maybe you're gonna bring it tomorrow, I'm not sure, but I would ask that maybe if there's a slide where you can kind of show that light spectrum in terms of the Kelvin temperature, where the light goes from the bluer, cool white to the more amber, warm light.
Sure, we can.
I think that visual is sort of important for the community, and then just in relation to the streetlights. And ma'am, if you want to come up and we can ask a question. It seems like the existing metal halide fixtures and potassium sodium fixtures that are used on the streetlights, if you could just tell everyone what that color temperature is towards to what we're going after her question.
Yes,
I'll actually show you the spectrum, because I have a spectrometer with me.
great. Yes, I'm Kamala Taylor, Zachary Taylor's wife. I have a couple of different questions. I do understand that our shopping centers are something we need to monitor. Having driven in Malibu for over 24 years, I think about the amount of light we need because it is a dark road. And maybe that's a different kind of light that we need to make sure that we're being safe on PCH. So I do think about the night birds. I think about owls and all the creatures we want to protect. At the same time, I think a hazard for us are the LED lights that so many cars now have. You know, we can't really control that, but that's another aspect of what we're dealing with at night. So we need to consider a different level for the shopping centers than we do for our street lights, and understand what is our spectrum and our length between our street lights on PCH. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, one more question.
Yes, just one follow-up thing. The real point of what I had begun to say is that when these LED manufacturers came out with LED lighting, and I've been around the lighting field for a while myself, they were really shooting for a high output light. So they're shooting towards 6,000 degrees Kelvin. That's your bluish light, and you see that in these LED fixtures that are used for outdoor street lighting. You see it a lot. You want to see a good example of it? Go out to Westward Beach. There's a very inappropriate LED lighting out there. How's it inappropriate? Give you two ways. Number one, the color temperature is far too high for the application. It should be down into a softer range. That's the beach, and that's what you're referring to before. I think that's very important. At this outset point, I think that you want to avoid at all cost going into that blue light zone, which is going to result in all the negative things that you've been going over. But now's the time when everyone can actually affect that and not allow that to happen, because you don't need that much light to do the job.
The other question could be posed is whether or not you need to have lights at Westward Beach, knowing that the beach is closed at night anyways.
Well,
in front of the houses.
I
That's
would
another
agree.
discussion, though.
I would agree. I'm just saying that is a very good example of how a high output LED light is used very inappropriately. Not to mention they're not hooded. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. We have one more question, Marianne, if you'd like to come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. Marianne Riggins. And I was just wondering, do we know what the temperature is on the lights that have been changed at the intersections already by Caltrans?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I do know that someone has someone that we can measure that with tonight.
And also, when we visit one of the centers, the Country Mart and the others, will we get the color temperatures when we're on those sites visiting those areas?
Yes, we are, and I believe he's going to have that tool with us as well. So that'll be very helpful, I think, to explain it. Also, tonight we have an overcast evening, so we're going to see a lot more of that glow, especially as you come up onto lights. I noticed this evening that we're not going to be necessarily looking from any of the mountains up down towards the city. But I would encourage you guys, after we take this tour tonight and you get educated, if you drive up one of the roads in the city or up even outside of the city that doesn't have street lights on it, and you look down into the city, and you will see those areas that are really glowing and how some of that color, temperature, and whatnot, it's going to start to catch your eye. It may become a little bit annoying at night because you really start paying attention to it. But anyways, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Bonnie, did you have to add anything else before we adjourn to the outside?
Jessica has a few more comments just to kind of give everybody a rundown on how the tour is going to work. But before then, I just wanted to let you know what we have as a tentative schedule for moving the ordinance forward. So we've got tonight's tour, the workshop tomorrow to continue to get public input. And then we are hoping to bring a draft of the ordinance to the Planning Commission July 17th. And depending on how that goes, be at City Council at the second meeting in August, which is the 28th. So that's our tentative schedule. I mean, if there's a lot of things that we need to react to in terms of adjusting the ordinance, then we'll make adjustments to the schedule.
All right, thank you. And then tomorrow evening, are we going to talk about some of the implementation related things?
Yeah.
Okay. Jessica.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody has all of the documents that were with the staff report. There's extra documents when you're entering down here. There's a table set up with some extra surveys and itineraries. The first one is probably one of the most important. That is the itinerary for tonight that has the locations of all 7 stops. It lists them with the GPS addresses on there too if you need to plug them in for Malibu's locations. The city cannot provide transportation, so we're encouraging everybody to carpool and want to make sure that the tour times are approximate times, but we really want to make sure that we keep these as close as possible. With the carpooling thing said, this is a Brown Act meeting, so the city has to ask that the commissioners and council members only limit their carpooling to 2 people in 1 car. And also with that said, please reserve your questions for tomorrow during the workshop. There'll be a survey available that you can write on the back of if you need to, or keep notes yourself so you can have the questions for tomorrow as well. There will be a staff member in a city car wearing a reflective vest at each tour stop. They're going to be there approximately 15 minutes beforehand in case anybody shows up early. And there will also be 2 city staff members that are going to kind of hang around at the tour stop 15 minutes after we leave, just in case people have a couple more issues or questions, or if anything comes up, you can kind of address them with them. We have 2 overview maps that are part of the packet. They show the locations, approximate driving directions. You can find your own way to there, I'm assuming. There are also individual aerial maps that contain a red star with the approximate location on the lot that we're going to be parking at. Some of the sites are big, so pay attention to where the star is located on the map. For convenience, we are encouraging everyone to park as close to the star as possible. Once we arrive at each stop, we will need everyone to turn off their vehicles and their vehicle headlights so that we reduce any additional lighting source. Staff members will have flashlights available in case there is any kind of safety concern. At the tour sites, we will listen to an overview by Jim about the outdoor light fixtures, intensity, and light spectrum. And examples of the light fixtures he's discussing can be found in the site exhibits. It's also one of the pamphlets and stuff that are at the front table if you want to pick one of those up on your way out. An important feature of the tour is the survey. There's 1 survey for each spot. While you're at the site, we ask that you complete the survey with your impressions. It's very easy to complete. There's, like I said, only 5 questions, and this will help us provide us with data as to your input and your ideas as to whether or not this was good lighting, whether or not it was bad lighting. There's an area under each question where you can put some comments. You can also write on the back if you need to. At the end of each tour stop, if you wouldn't mind handing those surveys to one of the staff members, myself, Bonnie, anybody over here, there'll be a couple other people you'll be able to recognize as well. It's very important that we get them by the end of the tour because tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., we're going to be compiling all the information. So if they don't come in until late, your survey data might not be counted. Also, I wanted to mention the city's dark sky website, probably familiar with that as well, but malibucity.org. It contains a e-notification area. You can fill that out, and then you'll be notified of any future meetings, planning commission meetings or city council meetings that are associated with the dark sky ordinance. It also contains a link to the International Dark Sky Association website. They have a number of brochures and handouts, and it's just a very informative website to help you with any questions you might have. The Dark Skies website for the City of Malibu also contains my contact information, so if you have questions about the dark sky ordinance or suggestions or things you want to see in the ordinance, you can email those to me or you can leave me a voicemail, and we'll try to collect all of that information before we finalize the draft ordinance. Other than that, I don't know if there are any additional questions on how the surveys or the tour is going to start or operate, and we can answer those now while everybody's in the same room.
All right, so we'd have a couple more questions up here, Jessica, real quick. But just to add to that, I think our first two locations are right here near City Hall. We'll start at the upper parking lot, and then we'll come down to the lower parking lot. Before we get there, though, Chris, go ahead.
Sorry, I kind of put a laundry list together for you, Jim. If you don't mind, I'll read them off and then see what you could respond to. But just as I was kind of thinking through some of the points you made, first off, like for how technology is changing, like you showed how 50% is that older with the lower lights. Are you seeing anything with using color or Wi-Fi controls versus motion sensors, coming as a trend, or is it as direction? I got a few here. And then, is that something that would be worth investing now? Because I wouldn't want to see us go to the way of sodium. Also, like questions about lifetime expectations on the bulbs, for lack of a better term, for the LEDs. That ramping up concept, it seems like it could be a distraction. I've got a neighbor that has little twinkling lights in his yard, bugs the hell out of me. So I'd just be curious if that ramp up, ramp down could be problematic in certain areas. And then just thinking about more remote locations, solar with LED seems like it's an option that probably wasn't there years ago. I wasn't sure if that's kind of factored in. And then the colors that were wrong, can those LED colors be replaced? If someone put in, say, 7K, can you put in a 3K on the same hardware, or does it all have to be thrown out? So that was it.
Let's see if I can remember all these now. Yeah, we can cover some of this tomorrow, Chris, but let me start off with the smart city thing, because we're working with so many communities around the country. It is the hottest topic, because what goes with the smart city thing, of course, is well beyond lights. It gets into surveillance, sensing systems for everything from traffic to people to gunshot sensors, all the things that are available today. And of course, as we all unfortunately know from the news, in some of the major cities of the world, this is critically important. Probably not as critically important here, but there's nothing wrong with planning for the future. It is certainly something you may want to take into consideration as you assess the city street lighting system, because the street lighting system supports all of that. By the way, yesterday I saw the first, what I would consider to be practical, self-powered streetlight that is literally got a photovoltaic and batteries and everything else, and will power an LED streetlight, and it will do pretty well even in an environment where you have frequent rain and fog, because the batteries are powerful enough so they can go almost a week without any significant sunlight. So first one I've seen, because I've been pretty critical of that and that whole marketplace, and this actually looked good. So
for an area like Malibu, we're not looking to add streetlights, should I say? It doesn't seem like at this point, even through this, we'd be replacing them in existing locations where there's already a capable power source.
Yeah, and that's that's usually true, and I don't recommend making the big investment in systems like that unless you really need them. Because you're going to spend $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 a pole more to make it self-powering. But it's pretty cool. At least it is practical. And if you had to trench and put in conduit for a mile, it actually could be a really good deal. So let me see some of the other questions. No, you can't change the color. The LEDs are literally soldered onto circuit boards that are built into the fixtures. And in order to change the color, you've got to literally put a new circuit board in. So, they are the color they come as.
Or you could add a lens.
Sorry?
You could add a lens.
It's been done, but there's a
Not
lot of,
recommended.
well, there's a lot of maintainability problems with them. You know, if you start messing around by adding stuff like that, you'll create a maintenance problem where the lens will fail or fall off or do something, and you know, it isn't a good permanent solution. LED lights have gotten to be so inexpensive compared to what they were just 3 or 4 years ago that, you know, like for example, in my hometown of Davis, California, as the city was putting up 4,000 Kelvin streetlights, which the community hated. There was a line out the door at the city council meeting, people screaming about these horrible new lights. And the city said, stop, we're gonna stop putting them in. They stopped putting them in the residential areas. They did a mock-up and a test. They dropped from 4,000 Kelvin to 2,700, but they cut the wattage in half. And people were happy, much happier. They went from a 1 in 5 acceptance rate to a 4 in 5 acceptance rate. And they saved enough energy to pay for taking the lights down and putting the new ones up. But yeah, they had to put new ones up. So but it was that gave me a lot of hope. What we showed there is residential lighting doesn't have to be a 30 or 40 watt street light. It can be like a 10 watt LED street light at 2,700 K, very well shielded. And people in those communities, and I think many of the communities, portions of this community that I've been in, they're going to love those low power, warm toned, well shielded street lights like we now have in our streets. Because I got one right outside my house, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have that color because it looks like a household light. It's actually whiter light, a purer light than the sodiums we've been living with for the past 50 years. And they weren't killing anybody, you know, so it's good stuff.
All right.
Did I miss any other questions?
No, we're good,
Okay.
thank you.
John?
Well, I just wondered, we're 50 minutes early, so can we knock a half an hour off our schedule? Or are we going to sit around here until 9:45?
The agenda, we need to stick to the times on the agenda because that was the published agenda. So everybody can regroup.
He didn't get a piece of cake yet. There's still cake in the back. You need a little sugar to stay awake.
So we'll have a break. We'll officially need to recess the meeting to the first tour location and when the mayor gets to that point and pick it up from there.
So, and the other part of that is just in the essence of the Brown Act. I don't think that the public at this point cannot ask us questions about this until we kind of reconvene, correct?
Right.
So I know we have about 35 minutes right now. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead. We have time to kill because we thought we were going to have a lot more public comments. So we prepared for it better than having it and then not being able to do it.
Next to, you know, PCH lighting, the other big problem is landscape lighting, and lots of people have spotlights that flood up into their trees or crazy amounts of lights on their houses. Do we have an incentive system? How are we going to get people to go along with this and tone it down?
I think that's something that we're going to probably talk about a little bit more tomorrow night, but definitely a big part of, you know, what I saw at Zeracis and now deals with a lot of that in a sense where we come down to the LZ0 and LZ1 where that's just not allowed in terms of the uplights and the landscape lighting and whatnot.
Thank you.
You could stick it up in the tree and you can shine it down, but you can't stick it on the ground and shine it up. So anybody else have any questions? Okay, so we're going to adjourn this meeting until 9:45 where we'll meet in the upper parking lot. That gives us a half an hour, so enjoy, I guess, City Hall. Riva, we're gonna make some coffee or anything for anyone? Does anyone want?
We can if you'd like some.
Did anyone want coffee? No? No takers? All right, we don't need to do that. Anyways, thank you. So
if I could ask if you made comments, if you could fill out a speaker slip, that would help us with our record. We've got speaker slips up here. Oh, you did? Oh, great.
all right, so I'm making a motion to adjourn and we'll reconvene at 9:45 in the upper parking lot. Thank you.
likes them.